Okay, so hi everybody. My name is April. I'm a reference librarian and currently the subject librarian for School of Sciences and the Humanities. And today I will be wearing a different hat as a moderator for today's book talk entitled Book Talk Break the Bias, hashtag Break the Bias. This is in celebration of the International Women's Day 2022, hashtag Break the Bias. So the library, in partnership with the Gender Consortium, collaborating with the schools and the student clubs, annually celebrates the Week of Women every March. So it supports the global campaign and international programs to raise awareness, value diversity and inclusion, and understand the importance of women's contribution to the society. And as part of the Week of Women's series of events, we have invited book authors to share with us their life and scientific discoveries through publishing. So join us and get to know our notable women authors. So to engage in the discussion, you can put your questions on the chat box or on the Q&A if we have it. But if not, just on the chat box. And also join us on the worldwide campaign using the hashtags hashtag NUWOW2022 and hashtag Break the Bias. So to set the tone of our event for today, may I ask Mr. Piotr Lapo, the Library General Expert and Acting Library Director of the NU Library, to provide the opening remarks.
So we have here the recording of the Piotr speech. I hope you can hear it clearly. I'll start it.
Dear participants of the Book Talks event, today is a remarkable day as we are participating for the first time when not one but three books written by NU faculty and researchers are presented at the same time. Of course, the more such books there are, the better, as they are not only enrich our library collection, but also promote Nazarbayev University's image as a research institution, which is certainly important and necessary for its higher reputation in the international academic community. Also, I would like to point out the facts that women are the authors of the books presented today and written on different topics. Also, they are representatives of different nationalities and cultures. They are distinguished scientists with a high international reputation and their personalities with diverse interests. All of these facts are very important for creating a new corporate culture, the level of which, of course, determines and will continue to determine the achievements of the university, including such achievement as NU graduates. The library's mission is to contribute to the sustainability and improvement of the NU corporate culture, both by providing access to high quality sources and diverse sources of information, and by providing communication meetings with those people who are carriers of a higher professional and personal culture. I am grateful to our esteemed authors, as well as all the participants of the event, thanks to whom it became possible. I want to wish you all good health, good luck, prosperity, and aspiration. Namely, creative inspiration makes our life rich in emotion and thoughts and allows us to live life with a sense of satisfaction. Thank you for your attention.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you for that recorded message, Piotr, and care of Lisa. So moving forward, let us now get to know our authors. So again, we have four notable authors here, and there are four well-known publications. Let me start with introducing one by one, and then afterwards, we will be asking the authors to provide a simple sharing of about their book and their journeys towards publication. Okay, our first author is Dr. Claire Griffin. She is an historian of science specializing the early modern Russian Empire and is an assistant professor in the Department of History, Philosophy, and Religious Studies at SSH. Her book is entitled Mixing Medicines, the Global Drug Trade and Early Modern Russia, explores the dynamic and complex world of early modern Russian medical drugs, from its enthusiasm for newly imported American botanicals to its disgust at Western European medicines made from human corpses. So Claire draws from the detailed apothecary records to shed light on the early modern Russian Empire's role in the global trade in medical drugs. So that's for Claire. Next is Dr. Shomyla Yousafzai, who is an internationally established academic in the field of entrepreneurship. Her research on the relationship between the socioeconomic focus of entrepreneurial pathways and empowering the disadvantaged, with a particular focus on the influence of gender upon women's entrepreneurship, has an important engagement and impact agenda. Her expert status is recognized through 10 edited volumes with Edward Elgar, Taylor and Francis and Routledge, 80 plus publications, 5,000 plus citations, 22H index, and as the associate editor, editorial board member, and reviewer of leading journals and funding bodies. Shumaila has a broad experience in applied and policy-related research on entrepreneurship in several international contexts. Her book is entitled The Research Handbook of Women's Entrepreneurship and Value Creation, and it highlights the importance of women as agents of change, acknowledging women entrepreneurs' efforts and supporting their value creation activities. With important implications for policymaking, contributing authors direct attention to and provide evidence for the positive contribution of women entrepreneurs to the economy regardless of their business's size and formal status. So that's Ms. Shomyla Yousafzai. Next is Dr. Jenni Lehtinen. Lehtinen is an assistant professor rather, of languages, linguistics, and literatures at SSH. She is the author of Narrative and National Allegory in Romulo Gallegos, Venezuela, and Doña Barbara Unleashed, from Venezuelan Plains to International Screen. Dr. Lehtinen's research interest includes fandom studies and film adaptations, specifically in the Latin American context. Her book is entitled Doña Barbara Unleashed, From Venezuelan Plains to International Screen, explores how Romulo Gallegos' original story has been kept alive yet altered by subsequent screen adaptations, and then the book illustrates how film and telenovela adaptations have reinforced Doña Barbara in order to mirror changes in societal norms such as the role of women in Latin American societies and audience expectations. Last but not the least, Dr. Anna Cohen-Miller is an internationally recognized qualitative methodologist and award-winning educational leader focused on equity and inclusion in higher education. She specializes in arts-based methods to amplify the voice of historically marginalized communities. Dr. Cohen-Miller is a successful at managing international interdisciplinary teams with an emphasis on building educational research capacity in Kazakhstan and throughout Central Asia. She has a proven track record of over 15 years advising programs, supervision, successful grant funding, curriculum design, and implementation from an early childhood education through graduate level. She is also a well-experienced spearheading the cutting-edge scholarship, connecting students, schools, and research communities. Dr. Cohen-Miller is an assistant professor at NU GSE and the co-founding director of the Consortium of Gender Scholars, where she developed a partnership with the Asian Qualitative Research Association. She is a founder of the Mother Scholar Project and the editor-in-chief of the Dialogue, the interdisciplinary journal of popular culture and pedagogy. Her book is actually entitled Questions in Qualitative Social Justice Research in Multicultural Contexts, takes readers on an accessible and inspiring journey to critically self-reflect on current or future research practices to encourage and facilitate greater equity, inclusion, and social justice and qualitative research. Okay, so those are our 4 great authors. And now I will be turning over the first, our virtual stage to our first author, Dr. Claire Griffin. And hopefully, for all the authors, this are point of discussion for today's book event. So you have to tell us something about your book, what inspired you to write the book, and what did you learn while writing this book. Okay, so again, for those who wanted to engage in the discussion, please put your questions on the chat box and join us on the worldwide campaign using the hashtag NUWOW2022 and hashtag Break the Bias. Dr. Claire?
Thank you, April. I was just slightly distracted because people had the wrong link. So I was just trying to email some people.
That, I was just writing that in the chat. So please ignore that. Yeah. So Amanda was messaging me. Sorry, Clive. Sorry for,
Yeah, so we were just a bit distracted trying to get the right link.
Sorry for interrupting. Everywhere I went in, it gave the link for yesterday's meeting, so I don't know how many people are going to come to this. Maybe you should send out a reminder with the new link.
Yeah, because we are still going,
Yeah, thank you, Amanda, for letting us know. Okay, so I'm supposed to be saying something about my book.
Yes.
Okay, so what is this book about? What are we prepared to do to heal ourselves and to maintain our health? And in particular, what are we prepared to consume to achieve that goal? If I told you that eating a live slug could help you, would you be prepared to do that? What would be the limitation of your level of comfort in what you are prepared to do in order to heal yourself? We are in the present world are generally used to listening to medical experts of various kinds, but we also know we don't always follow doctor's orders. We don't take our medications. We do use something our aunt gave us. We do make our own decisions. And so healing yourself is never just about medical expertise. It's always also about what we ourselves are prepared to do. And that is partly based on senses of the self and senses of our own body. So if a medicine might make us gain weight, or might make our hair fall out, or might include an ingredient that we are not prepared to consume for religious or ideological reasons, well, that all impacts on what we then choose to use or to set aside, or to consider whether or not we are prepared to use it. And so this book is about that from the perspective of the early modern Russian court. There is a totally freak archival survival here that is really what has allowed me to write this book. Daily prescriptions to the courtly elite have survived almost nowhere. Almost 0 countries have day by day lists of what goes to the Tsar and other people. But for Russia, it happens that a lot of the documents from the 17th century in particular have survived. And so I was really inspired reading those documents for an earlier project to say, well, there has to be something here to talk about. So for example, we have the full collection of treatment records for the final illness of Tsar Romanov dynasty is lying dying. We know what they gave him. We know what they considered to be important and appropriate to give to a Tsar. So this is huge in terms of medical history. To get that kind of document is very significant. What have I then learned from these documents? There is one particular popular point that's come out of this study, which is the place of American herbal medicines in 17th century Russian medicine. The established story of Russian-American links is that in the 1730s, a Academy of Sciences expedition sets out across what we now call the Bering Straits and hits the Aleutian Islands. And from there is a short-lived colony called Russian America, which is basically now Alaska. But from around 1602, you already have American goods like sassafras being imported and being used. And in fact, that's one of the things that is given to Mikhail Fyodorovich as he lies dying. So then this is huge. This rewrites the chronology of Russian-American interactions and also the geography. They're almost certainly getting that sassafras from Spanish-controlled Florida. We are not supposed to be part of the Atlantic world. And this then allows us or requires us to totally rethink the international connections of the early modern Russian Empire by focusing on this one specific kind of commodity, which is the ingredients of consumable medicines. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that simple sharing, Claire. So I probably maybe take note of that interesting thing that you have mentioned about the Russian-American interaction as early as 1602. Am I right? So that was really a great, a great discovery about this particular medicine or the world of medicine, especially the integration of American and the Russian interaction. Okay, so thank you for that, Claire. So moving forward, may I ask Dr. Shumaila to share something about her book?
Okay, thank you, April. My research is on women entrepreneurship. And in the beginning, I was looking into the constraints of what stops women from growing and performing and becoming more successful. So in some of my interviews with women entrepreneurs, I will ask them, why don't you want to grow more? What can we do to help you grow? And they started coming up with definitions of success and performance, which were totally different to what I had in my mind, like making more money, growing their businesses, making franchises. All I had in my mind at that time was money. So the more money you make, the more people the jobs you create, the more successful you are, because this is the definition we have from a male perspective. These women were coming up with very strange definitions. I want to help other women. I want to impart knowledge. I want to help my family. I want to do this. All very not money related performance measures. And this made me think that we are measuring success and performance from a male perspective. We are putting that definition on women, and then we are trying to find out whether these women are successful or not. Are they performing well or not? What happens then? We just label them as underperformers, because then they do not reach that criteria, that threshold, the male defined threshold. When we say that they are not successful, they are underperformers, they are not in the radar of policymakers. There are no loans for them. Banks do not give them credit. Policymakers don't, especially the informal businesses that women entrepreneurs have. And then this has a very big consequence for them. So in one of my, by the way, I'm not an author, I'm editor. So I edit books. So this is one of the edited volume that I did. So then in my first volumes, I was looking into barriers, and then I started thinking, well, we need to start thinking of the performance and success from a woman's perspective. I started looking into the notion of constrained performance rather than underperformance, because there are things that are stopping women from performing. And then moving forward, I started looking into redefining success and performance from a woman's perspective. And this recent book that has just been launched, we have asked women entrepreneurs to tell us everything about themselves that makes them feel valuable, that they create value, they are important, but those things are not related to money. So there are 4 levels that we look at the performance and success. One is the individual level. So if a woman is becoming more confident, her life is becoming better, she's becoming happier, she is becoming she feels that she's a more valuable contribution to the society. And if her family is becoming more prosperous, her daughters are now going to school, they are eating better, they are getting married later now because she is being able to decide that the daughter can now go to school and rather than getting married, and she can wear better, she can eat as well as the boys, and other things about the household. And then we look at the business level, because I saw that a lot of women entrepreneurs, there was one main thing in their agenda. They wanted to help other women entrepreneurs. He is very kind of lonely. He has a goal and he's going towards that goal. But a woman, she's walking, and whoever she's seeing in her way, she's pulling them in. Come on, you can do that as well. I can teach you how to do that. It was very interesting. I had workshops with asylum seekers in Cardiff. I was training them how to become entrepreneurs. Now, these were women who have left everything empty-handed, and they're just starting their life again, and you ask them, what's the goal of your life? I want to help others. And that was very strange for me, that you are already empty-handed. You need to read your life, and all you want. And then at the societal level, the value that they create by bringing gender equality, gender roles are changing. So in this book, we actually tried to highlight all these non-monetary values. Because the goal is we can start acknowledging, and the ultimate goal is to legitimize value, which is not measured on monetary, which was not something we thought before. Or some countries are measuring their economies based on the well-being of people rather than the performance indicators. So I would like to see a time where we can start looking at women in terms of the value that they create, which is not just monetary value. So this book is all about that, basically. There's one interesting thing that we did with this book is that we managed to get some external funding, and we hired a director, an editor of a documentary. So every contributing author, when they were going and interviewing the women entrepreneurs, we trained them. Okay, while interviewing, can you get us some shots of this woman creating all these values, helping the children, helping women, talking about themselves. And then all these shots, when they got together, this director helped us to turn it into a documentary. So Yelizaveta can put in the chat box for me a short demo of that documentary. So we had one premiere before, but now we're going to, in the book launch, I will do a full premiere of that documentary. So that was a good way of disseminating the results to the wider population on how these women think that they are valuable. And one woman in particular, I remember Josephine, she's on minute 607. She was a farmer in Namibia. I interviewed her, and Josephine was like, her face was shining, her eyes were shining. She was just growing some vegetables. If you look at her from that perspective, she was not successful or performing. And she was saying, I am important. I am important because I do this. If Josephine thinks she is important, who are we to tell Josephine that she is not important? So, that's what I actually is my goal. Even for me as a woman academic, I feel many times my success is measured on the basis of things that, my male colleagues can produce as well, but it just ignores everything else that I do as a woman. So I feel like our success needs to be measured in a different way than that's all I want to say about this book.
All right. So thank you
And
so
I have edited it, so I'm not the author. I have contributed a chapter, but I'm not the author.
All right. So thank you for that sharing, Shumaila. It was really interesting to know that, redefining the success or the value of success, especially empowering women. Sometimes I also think the same that, if you go with entrepreneurship, it's more something about the money, but it really goes beyond the value of money. It's more of helping others and empowering other women as well. So thank you for that. It was such a great book to to really read on, especially. Okay, so moving forward, we have, I think my colleague Elisabetta was able to put the link to that documentary. So if you have time, you can also check that one. So, but moving forward, let's try to hear something about Dr. Jenni's book entitled Doña Barbara Unleashed. Jenni?
Okay, thank you. So as I start, I think the way to understand what I'm doing is to kind of tell where this project sprang from, and also a little bit about, so I work on screen adaptations, film adaptations, and telenovela, which are Latin American soap operas, basically, adaptations of Doña Barbara. But I mean, I don't think I can really move on to talking about these adaptations at all if I don't give you some background about Doña Barbara. So basically, Doña Barbara is a novel written by the Venezuelan educator, politician, and author Rómulo Gallegos, and it was published in 1929. Interesting fact about Rómulo Gallegos is also he was Venezuela's first democratically elected president, although his presidency was very short. What this tells us, however, is that he was very concerned about socio-political issues of the Venezuelan country, even though he was writing fiction. So basically, Doña Barbara is considered often as one of the most canonical, if we can use the word canon, canonical Latin American novels, which has inspired many of the later writers, which you might be familiar with, like Gabriel García Márquez, Mario Vargas Llosa, Julio Cortázar, and so on. So Doña Barbara, the novel, it tells the story of a young city-educated lawyer who returns to the kind of farm owned by his family, which has been completely, cast aside and has not been taken care of for many years. And when the area where this farm is located is run by a female despot or autocrat who is referred to as Doña Barbara. So what she's been doing is basically stealing the land of all her neighbors for years and years, and no one really dares to go against her. Now, she's not presented necessarily in a very, how should we say, positive terms in the novel, but she's definitely someone we could qualify from the start with as a powerful woman. And there's a really sad backstory to her as well, because she has become this tyrannical, horrible lady because she was raped as a teenager, and she has this strong hatred for men and so on and so on. So I will not enter that in any more detail. But anyway, so this young lawyer returns to his farm, and he's all for civilization, enlightenment, and progress. And he comes face to face with Doña Barbara, who on the other hand presents what could be considered as the barbarism that reigns still in Venezuela at the time. And also Doña Barbara has a daughter who she has completely neglected, who's living in extreme poverty with her father. So what happens then is that Doña Barbara, who seems to have a heart of stone, falls in love with this young lawyer, while he falls in love with the daughter and takes her under his wing, and they eventually get married. So the way the novel ends is that basically Doña Barbara disappears without a trace, whilst the lawyer and the daughter get married and live happily ever after, whilst building a fence between the lands, which symbolizes progress, kind of division of land according to fair principles, and so on and so. However, what is quite interesting is that Gallegos did not want to kill off Doña Barbara. And this is something that has haunted literary critics for years and years, and also the people who worked on the subsequent adaptations. It's almost that whilst he's condemning this barbarism, he's nevertheless not willing to kill her off. In a nutshell, Doña Barbara's story, the initial novel, can be considered as an allegory of a battle between civilization and barbarism. And it's also being considered very widely by literary critics as an indirect attack of dictator Juan Vicente Gomez's long regime in Venezuela. So he's kind of the symbol of, even if it's a woman, we're talking about Doña Barbara in a way, she's a figure for the barbarism that Gomez used to embody. So what my book is about is that with that background information in mind, my book looks at how the story of Doña Barbara continues to fascinate Latin American audiences and how the story is changed in order to reflect on different differences in society, how society has changed, and especially how women's position in society has changed. So what I've done in the book is I've taken 4 different screen adaptations, one which is a very famous 1943 Mexican film adaptation. That is a film from the so-called Mexican golden age of cinema, which is probably considered by many as the real adaptation of Doña Barbara as a starting point. Then I've also taken a very feminist version by the Venezuelan American director Betty Kaplan from 1998, and 2 21st century telenovelas produced by Telemundo, one from 2008 and one from 2016. And I'm kind of, what I've done, I put them in dialogue with each other. And this is how my work differs from much of the earlier work carried out on screen adaptations, because normally when people work on screen adaptations, they tend to continuously compare the adaptations with the initial novel, the actual text, rather than looking at how different adaptations have influenced each other and how they have changed. So in a way, I'm not only casting light on how the story of Doña Barbara has changed, but also I'm providing an alternative way of looking at screen adaptations, which is barely anyone has done this before, even if it's quite obvious in many senses. So I'm basically looking at how also the narrative of Doña Barbara has changed in response to what audiences expect. So, for instance, audiences in 1943 would have been very uncomfortable with, having this very liberated female character, whilst 21st century audiences are much more willing to give her more liberty, more agency, and so on. So what I would like to say is that whilst I look at provide close readings of the different texts, the different film text and screen text, particularly what is interesting is I see a progression in the narrative of Doña Barbara and how it has been altered over the years. So the most recent, and I think this is something that I just tell kind of a selling point of my book, is that the most recent 2016 telenovela, it doesn't respect the original ending. So I mentioned already that the 1929 novel itself leaves the open ending. So people and readers and scholars can interpret it in a number of ways. And so audiences, even when this latest 2016 telenovela was announced, one of the things that audiences really were obsessed about, they talked about, we want a different ending for Doña Barbara. We want a happy ending for her. She has suffered. Why does she have to be like banished from her land, banished from her whole life, and kind of presented completely as a villainess? So what the 2016 telenovela does is that it provides an alternative ending. So first it provides the kind of similar ending to the novel and the previous versions, and then it actually gives us a very different perspective. We get to find out that she has not disappeared actually, and she hasn't died, because she calls, because this is a modern version, so they have telephones, they have internet, they have social media. She calls this young lawyer from Paris and says like, I'm still alive, I'm still ready to strike back. But, so what is important about is not so much that there's a different ending, but what this ending tells us. It tells us about the fact that 21st century audiences are very willing to accept a strong female figure and to kind of forgive her for the bad things she's done by explaining that she's also been a victim herself. What it also tells us that audiences have a lot of power. And this is where my use of fandom studies theories comes in. Audiences have power, and if they say they don't like something, producers and creators nowadays can't simply ignore it. They have to take it into account. And whilst they might not be complete power to the audiences, they nevertheless need to please them as well. So basically, in terms of my research, when I worked on the film adaptations themselves, my research on the 1943 and 1998 adaptations, which are films, was very different to the research I carried on in 21st century adaptations. So these older adaptations, I basically went a lot to the Cineteca Nacional in Mexico City. I had a grant from NU, which I'm very grateful for, which allowed me to carry out this research. And I did archival research. I read reviews because there was no way to really get to know what the audiences wanted, what the audiences were talking about. Now, in terms of the 21st century telenovelas that I worked on, I relied very, very heavily on social media, and especially on Facebook and Instagram, and how people were carrying out discussions there about what they wanted. And one of the very interesting things was that whilst working on this project, because of a big project, it took a number of years, this latest 2016 telenovela came out. So it was like there was an actual change to my research plans whilst carrying out the research. And I had to ask a little bit of extra time from the publisher because I wanted to have this chapter on the 2016 telenovela. What is very interesting as well is that this 2016 telenovela went so far away from respecting the original plotline that they created a season 2. And I've heard that there's going to be a season 3, which go away, completely abandon the actual initial narrative, create an alternative future history from Doña Barbara, which is exactly what scholars and critics have all for years and years wondered about what happened to her. So, so kind of to sum up, I think my book shows how we can learn a lot about changes in women's social political position in Latin American society by looking at different variations and adaptations of the story of Doña Barbara. And we also can see the power that audiences are gaining over the years. And finally, I'm putting the screen adaptation theory and fandom studies, which have never really been put into dialogue with each other, even if they can give excellent insights from different perspectives. I'm putting them into dialogue with each other. And here's a hard copy of my book. I actually have one. I think that's all I have to say. Thank you.
All right. So thank you for that very interesting sharing about your book. So by the way, the library already has a copy of that book. So we have one copy. I probably getting more. And it was really nice to, I got something from your sharing about, because back in the days, I also been watching some telenovela, but it's on the Mexican side, Mexican telenovela. And as time goes by, readers tend to compare the actual text vis-a-vis with what they are watching on the film or on the on the TV. And then eventually, with the power of audience, they can the production sometimes ask the audience about what would be the suitable ending based on the plots and everything. So it was really nice to know the power of audience also on determining the ending of a simple, this kinds of film adaptation and so on and so forth. Thank you for that. So if you wanted to borrow this book, we have a copy. For the rest of the book, we already put some orders. So we will try to have it as much as possible. And we have been seeing so many discussions already on the chat. So we hope to get in touch with all of those comments and probably, hopefully, a film showing in the future. Let's talk about it. So for the meantime, let's have another one. We have Dr. Anna for his book, Questions in Qualitative Social Justice Research in Multicultural Context. Hello, Dr. Anna.
Thank you so much, April, and thanks everyone. Let me actually pull up a screen. Give me 1 second as I get into the presenter mode. So presenter view. Okay, so here you go. All right, so thank you all so much. Hello, everyone. So again, I'm Dr. Anna Cohen-Miller, and as you know, I'm in the Graduate School of Education and co-founding director of the Consortium of Gender Scholars. Thanks also to the library, April, thank you so much. Liza, Piotr, for all of your support in the Week of Women in the Consortium of Gender Scholars. So this book, so Questions in Qualitative Social Justice Research in Multicultural Contexts, this is, I kind of wonder, it's like, well, why the need for another book and why another research book? And so just to kind of give a framework, so while many other research books focus on research and might encourage reflection, this book provides an innovative examination of research methods by steering researchers, in particular emerging researchers, but also across the spectrum through a series of steps, including exercises and thought experiments, challenging and facilitating them to engage deeply in their own meaningful work, in your own meaningful work, raising then awareness about the importance of such topics of voice, trust, vulnerability, positionality, and perspective. So I'm going to show you a few things. So I'm putting a slide here, right, of who I am, because this is, again, as we've heard from others as well, it's like where we come from is what we lead to, and especially in research. So you can see on a very broad scale that, okay, I could say, or on a professional side, I'm a qualitative social justice researcher, focus on equity and inclusion, arts-based methods. But what is beyond that? What's at a deeper level, right? Where do these lenses come from in terms of, phrases of positionality, reflexivity? So an inspiration for writing the book. And I'm going to read a small portion of this that comes from the book. So I say that I'm Sephardic, Spanish Jewish, cisgender woman. I pass as, quote, white in the US, but often felt like an outsider, having to prove to others who I was. I was frequently the only Jewish student in my class or workplace and regularly faced hearing, seeing, and experiencing discrimination. My history extends to the Spanish Inquisition, where stories were frequently told about our ancestors who had to flee the Iberian Peninsula for fear of their lives as refugees. Another part of my family is also connected to oppression, fleeing persecution in Germany, Hungary, and Russia, in some parts that are now the Ukraine. Concerns over our safety and well-being about being different were and are realities. Today, I'm a mother of 2 young children, including a gender non-binary child. I speak Spanish to them and we've raised them Jewish. These historical memories and current realities have led to my commitment to addressing issues of equity, inclusion, and social justice. So then questions then, right, that could come back to you as a researcher, right? What about you? What is your positionality? What has informed who you are? And this evolves, right? These are types of questions that we can continue to come back to. What do other people see and think when they see you? And why might this be important to your research? So why integrate questions as foundational in research textbooks? I suggest that, or I propose, I argue for, questions allow us to see where we are, where we want to go. They can prompt us, promote us to work purposefully to address, in particular, these large-scale wicked problems such as social justice. So broadly, then, the book integrates critical self-reflection to enhance self-awareness and growth as more socially just researchers. Critical self-reflection we define as within qualitative research as emphasizing, reflecting on our work to purposely become better researchers. Then you can draw as well from John Dewey. We do not learn from experience, but we learn from reflecting on the experience. So this is a continued evolution of becoming better. Where is it that we want to go? So sample critical self-reflection questions about, this is from the first chapter, on owning our power. So when you go into a community, whether it's, as Shumaila was talking about, with different business owners, or, right, Claire, you're working with text, but also, right, to think of who has power in terms of, and you mentioned this, in terms of what is written down and what is not written down. Or Jenni, same thing about the connection to the pop culture and what is being said and what isn't, right? How do we classify our types of power? Where is knowledge centered? What types of knowledge are present? Which types are respected and by whom? So we can then see that, so within the book, it offers guidance for early career and established researchers to help through concerns to recognize that there's not a simple right or wrong, right? So questions that emerge, and I have this picture of me and research students, because they helped actually encourage me to write this book. They kept on asking questions as, do I have enough participants? Right? Did I build trust enough? Right? How do I know if I'm asking the right questions? And instead, to be able to go back and have questions to help guide them and guide others through, well, what does it mean about enough? How am I defining enough? And how am I showcasing that? So the book gives ideas to address researcher concerns and help with self-awareness, embed social justice, ethics as central to all the themes. Here we define, so I wrote the book with Nettie Boivin, who used to work at NU, first in SSH and then in the Graduate School of Education. Social justice and research is the purposeful commitment and advocacy to address systemic and systematic issues of equity and inclusion, in particular for marginalized and oppressed peoples. So it draws from experiences, successes, and struggles faced through reflections of the field to people that I admire in various research fields, and ask them, could you contribute something about your experience, where you've slipped, maybe a failure, your insights, to help us understand better. So from those around the world, global North and global South, Indigenous rights researchers, and we have a couple quick examples. So this is from Kakali Bhattacharya, who's an award-winning critical contemplative scholar and focused on social justice. She wrote for the chapter of Owning Our Power. So this little bit, she says, when I think of owning our power, I do not think of power that comes with rank, money, or visibility, and or external indicators. Instead, for me, power is internal, imaginal, that manifests outwardly in external relations and practices. From Linda Tuhiwai-Smith, who's the founder of Indigenous Decolonial Methods. She wrote in a chapter on this spectrum of insider outsiderness. So recognizing that we're not just an insider, just an outsider, that there's a whole spectrum. There's nothing like building a wall or barbed wire fence to keep people in or out that tells a story about the visible and invisible territorial power of borders and boundaries. Escaping over or under or passing through these borders signifies some kind of transition, not just of the physical body, but of the ontological process of changing identity and sense of being. Those visible borders are easy to identify. However, there are many borders, less obvious and more subtle in the way they appear. There are epistemic borders, disciplinary borders, institutional borders, and linguistic and psychological borders. So the book creates connections between topics, so I was mentioning, such as power, trust, vulnerability. And so such a question is, how can we work to allow and facilitate other people's own voices without inadvertently imposing our own prejudices, authority, and power on another set of people? Again, these are questions that we don't just answer once, but we have to return to if this is our focus on being socially just, making change. So how do we, as qualitative, social justice-minded researchers, find our path forward in an increasingly diverse multicultural world? We say that a simple response is we take it step by step and we see what we can learn from others and where our growing awareness and critical self-reflection and enhance social justice. So where can critical self-reflective questions take you in your research? It suggests that they can guide ourselves and others in researching multicultural contexts. They can expand critical self-reflection and awareness, and they can enhance social justice research or socially just research. So the last little quote, so from Anthony Onwegbuzi from the University of Cambridge, and also scholar from South Africa. He says that this inspirational book begins to fill a void in a way that will make a significant contribution to the literature. And that's what we hope, right? And this is what we're hearing from different researchers, from the emerging scholars and from others. So it first came out at the end of last year. And thanks so much to Yousafzai for, we did do a book launch earlier, and I'm really pleased to be able to be here with y'all today to be able to share a little bit on it. Thanks.
Thank you for that sharing, Anna. So for this book, my main takeaway is to become a better researcher. And again, this is a startup. This is a very good book for those who wanted to be more, be more out there, especially if you're doing the research methodology and some other things about qualitative research. Thank you for those for that book. And again, I think this time for us is to have a very simple Q&A. Thank you for your sharing. So if there are some questions from the participants, you can put that on the chat. I think you can also, unmute yourself if possible. But again, to join us on the discussion, you can put your questions on the chat box, or also join us on the campaign using the hashtags NUWOW2022 and NU hashtag break the bias. Any questions from the participants?
I would love to ask a question to Shumaila, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Shumaila, thank you so much for presenting your work and the innovative way that you were bringing in the media and this idea of the documentary and teaching folks about that. How did you find, or was there any pushback in terms of like getting ethical approval to do that, or any tips on how to move through that process?
Yeah, so we were not asking any sensitive questions. So we had already had ethical approval for our interviews. And then the participant just had to agree that they are okay to be filmed and that it will be made public. It will be anonymous. Also, every contributing author was going through the ethical process at their own institution. So it was not a central process. So I don't know how did they go through the ethics procedure in their institution, but for me, it was just to make sure that everybody has agreed, they have signed the consent form, and they know it's not going to be anonymous and it will be shared with everyone. And women were very actually happy to be recorded and to show that they value them. We should care about them. So because it matters to them, so they were okay too. And it was not violence or harassment or anything else. So there was no issues with that.
Great.
The only
Thanks so
issue
much,
for us
Shumaila.
was to get the funding. Funding was, everybody was like, what documentary, what funding for that? So it was difficult to get the funding for that. And then what we did, a lot of contributing authors, we pitched in. So we all got some money from our institutions. I got some, and 2-3 others got some, and that way we paid to the director. So then that lady trained all the contributing authors on how to record the video and the script and everything, post and pre-production, and then she got everything together and she edited it for us. We paid her for that. Yeah.
Thank you, Shumaila.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Shumaila, for the answer. How about the others? Do you have other questions from other authors? Yeah, probably I can ask one. So maybe this is for all the authors. This is quite personal on that level, but would you say would you have your interesting writing quirk, something like that? Do you have some sort of, it's based on the style, your style of writing? Do you have some interesting skills or writing quirk that you want to share with the participants? Anybody can answer.
Can I jump in here and give an answer?
Yeah, sure.
What I'm doing is a lot of translation, usually from Old Russian into English. And I am always very insistent that we need the original. And I often won't even agree on one single translation of a word, because words don't map onto each other perfectly across things, especially 17th century Russian to modern English. Like, we can't do this simply. And so one of my particular quirks that I'm often fighting with editors about is I want the full original quote in the original language, ideally in the text, but if not, in the footnote. And I will put in, like, this word could mean this /this/this, because we can't, given what I do about things coming through different contexts, you can't always pin things down to, like, this is the one thing that it means. I want to be able to have a discussion of the multiplicity of meanings of a particular term.
That's an interesting thing to know. How about the others?
Yeah, I would say that something that I found interesting is, like, well, in a way, I'm trying to market my research to two different audiences. So I'm marketing it to Hispanists, which is to study, my research study area. And at the same time, I'm also marketing it to wider audiences who study film adaptations and fandom. So I sometimes find myself, as I'm currently between two fields. So I'm a Hispanist, and I could be working, for instance, in the Department of Hispanic Studies, whilst at the same time I'm a cultural studies scholar. So I could basically be working in a cultural studies department as well, working on screen adaptation regardless of the language in which my primary research is. Now, at NU, I'm kind of lucky because we have a very diverse department of language, linguistics, and literature, so I fit in very well. But I do find this, like, even when I was finishing off my book, Wales University Press wanted all the quotations in English and in Spanish. So kind of building on what Claire just said a couple of minutes ago, I am not dealing with very old language, except, I mean, the actual 1929 novel uses lots of regionalist terms, which are, I'm not comparing them to Old Russian, but they are difficult to translate. And even the book itself often comes with a glossary at the end, because students who study the novel will not understand, even other Spanish speakers will not necessarily understand all the terms. So that's something I'm dealing with. Whilst in terms of the comments on social media, they are often very colloquial. They use idioms. They don't even spell out words completely. And it's a very, very, how should we say, difficult situation when you have to translate them to English and still catch the kind of colloquialism of the expressions, whilst nevertheless not doing it literally. So, I mean, that's something that I was not trained to do in any way, so I just had to learn how to do it myself.
Thank you. How about the others, like, Shumaila or Anna? Do you have your interesting writing quirk?
Yeah, I would like to say, I take inspiration from the things happening around me, my interactions with people, and that gives me ideas on how to move forward. And I use my intuition. I meet these women and they are saying things, and there's light bulb moment, and that gives me an idea of what to do next. And recently I went to Kyrgyzstan and I saw this community-based tourism, how it was empowering women. I was amazed on how empowered these women were who were running those CBTs, and their daughters, how confident and strong they were. They were like partners with their mothers, and the man was like on a side. He was just like serving food or something, and it was the woman who was running the whole show. And then I wrote a faculty development grant based on that idea. So my next project is community-based tourism and how it empowers women entrepreneurs. So I just look around myself and I find these inspirational things and I take them into my research. But the disadvantage for me being in a business school is that these things don't count. So for my promotion, this book will not count for anything. They will just say, where is the FT 50/50 article? Where is the 4-star journal article? And if it's a qualitative work, most of this work is qualitative. We cannot publish it in good journals. It has to be quantitative work. So qualitative papers don't really make through the good journals. But why do I do this? Because I want to have some meaning in what I do in my life, in my work. So, I do this at the expense of my time. But hopefully, I just make value for myself and for other people in doing so. So it's very unfortunate that in my area, books really don't count. They should, as Claire has mentioned, but they don't. I just wanted to say, my reality. Yeah, but I will not stop doing it. I'll keep doing it.
Thank you for that sharing, Shumaila. Again, women should not stop doing things that they really like just because it doesn't push through with something else. How about Anna? Do you have something to share about your writing work?
Sure. Thank y'all for sharing about yours. It's really interesting directions, thinking about the interdisciplinary, the language, the culture, the what counts and what doesn't. And those are all points that actually really stand out with this work as well, where it's like, okay, what led to this and how do we speak to the multiple audiences? You look at this and how to help everyone understand what's there. And I think really what this has led to for me, or the writing of it, is the next steps, is thinking about, I focus on qualitative research here, but what does it mean to be reflective in quantitative or mixed methods research? And so that's the next step on, a book that I'm working with, actually with Kelly Grace, who's also at Nazarbayev University, and then also one that starting out, again, this is this other one for Rutledge, about life-changing moments of research. And what does it actually feel like to be out in the field? So this example that Shumaila, you started to give about being in Kyrgyzstan and seeing that, right? Like those kinds of descriptions bring readers or bring audiences to really have a visceral connection, to know like, this is what it's like. This is how I can change, how I can make changes maybe in the world, and at a minimum for research and steps forward, such as having books count as research productivity. So thanks so much, April.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. I have another question here. If I know that you have so much on your plate, you've been teaching and then doing research, but I just want to know, what is your current work schedule when you're writing? Do you allocate at least like 1 week to write and then close, you don't get out of your room and then just write? Or do you have other things to do, or how do you plan things out? Anybody can answer.
It's very chaotic. I envy my male colleagues who can just leave the kids to their wives and they can just go, or if they are in a house, they just shut the room. That's it. No, everyone has to be quiet, or the wife has to take the kids out because the man is working. I cannot demand such thing. I cannot. My kids have been banging the door since I'm in this, because I homeschool as well. So all the 4 kids are at home and they are learning at home. So it's the reality of a woman, an academic, an entrepreneur, anywhere, it's very tough. It's I stay awake at nights, really. I work late hours in the morning. Then I have to wake up again very early in the morning to start running the show again.
Oh, yeah.
That's the reality. But
there are some who have agreed on what you are saying, Shomyla. Anna is, I think they have the same, situation. Can you share something about this, Anna?
Sure, right. I mean, this speaks, Shumaila, to the work that I do with mothers in academia, so mother scholars and as one of the group of people that has historically been marginalized, right? That the universities in general were not places that allowed women, let alone many other places, but looking within academia, women weren't here. And then, okay, women are allowed, and yet their voices, their roles aren't recognized. And there are some places that's more so. So actually at Nazarbayev University, there is a bit more recognition of families. And I think because of how the university is structured, so we've worked over the years with Gen Con, with the library, to put in things like children's rooms and changing tables to show like, oh, families do exist. But I think the point that you also brought up, Shumaila, in terms of what counts as productivity, this then goes back to a male model of what counts, right? And so there's still work to be done, and I'm thankful that you bring it forward, right?
Yeah, it's so superficial, the concessions that have been made. They are not with good intention. I've worked in UK for the first 20 years of my career. And, in promotion process, in the end of the promotion application, there is a page which says any circumstances that have led to your promotion, please mention. So I mentioned I have had many career breaks, but in the end, okay, they mentioned we considered, but your productivity is not as compared to your other colleague. We need to have 5 papers and all this. How can I do that? Okay, then you just, it's so frustrating. So a woman selling vegetables in the market in Kyrgyzstan, basically she's facing the same realities that I am facing, a PhD or, from a good university working as an academia. We need to fight. We need to fight for all of that, for them, for my daughter, for everyone. So yeah, this is one way we can do that, what we are doing to create an awareness and acknowledgement of other things that we do. The discussion has gone into a very different tangent, sorry.
All right. I think we have arrived to some, to the latter part of our program. So I think I'm not sure if Jenni is about to leave, but maybe just ask some of your parting words before we totally end this particular discussion. Probably some words to inspire others to write their own book, if you would like to.
Hi, April. I'm not just to inspire, I just want to thank.
All right.
Because so many insights from today's speakers. Thank you so much for sharing all these things with us, because for us, for people who are not really writing for now books, this is really exciting to know all these things. Thank you so much. And I have a comment, by the way. As a library, we're doing our job greatly. And I would like to say that we also have Anna's book in the library. So we got it in February. So it's 4 copies. Yep, we have 5 hard copies in the library. So if you would like to borrow it, we are here. Thank you so much.
Maybe can I suggest we can also do a session from the authors to tell other people how did we go through this process? What is the process of writing a proposal, of contacting a publisher, of contacting authors? Like for me, editing, I do editing mainly. So how did I do that? Or those who are sole authors, they can explain, how long did it take? Are there any ways to, improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the process? How to write a good proposal? So I think we can do that. I'm happy to contribute to that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Shumaila. We will take note of that, and hopefully in the coming days or weeks, we can organize something out of this discussion. How about probably it's time for the parting words from the authors to inspire others to, to start to write. Who wants to go first?
Perhaps I'll jump in here then.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to write because, you know, it's this huge thing, and it's not just on you. You have to convince someone to contract, as Shumaila says, you have to get someone like on board with this process. I think it was Toni Morrison who came up with this great quote of, if there's a book that you want to read and it doesn't exist, you have to write it yourself. And I think that is really important to remember, and to if you have a book you want to write, pick up a pen today and write something, and like start that process, because the start of it and the attempt of it and valuing yourself enough to start the process and see what happens is really a huge thing, especially for female authors.
Yeah. I would like to say that, you know, if you want to edit volumes, the first time, don't do it alone. Just reach out to people who are doing it and join hands with them. It's such a big jump that you can take in your learning process by working with them. So you learn all the ins and outs of the publishing process, and reach out. Just, you know, you can be fourth or fifth editor, whatever it is, but you will be part of the process. You will learn, and this will give you a book as well on your name, and then you will get to know the publisher as well. You will develop contacts with the authors. So reach out to big names who are publishing in your area. And in the beginning, when I started editing, I brought in some big names and I said, I will do all the work. I just want you to be there and teach me. They didn't do much work actually in my first few edited books, but I learned from what they have spent time learning all of that. So, you know, they taught me a lot of things. So I did all of that because I needed some books on my name as well at that time in my early times. So reach out to some big names in your area, write to them, and they are happy to help. Most of the people are actually happy to help. Yeah.
Thank you for
These
that.
are all great.
Yeah.
So just to add, and I found was that going ahead, at least in my field, that we at conferences, there are often editors who are there that you can talk to. And even on the online ones, that you can then have like an editorial session that you can go and chat with them, and just brainstorming some of the ideas to see, like, would this even be something you might be interested in? And then after hearing like, yes, this sounds interesting, then I would start to present workshops or presentations related to it. So then I could see, okay, what's the kind of feedback that I'm getting and where to adjust, and where is it that people are looking, where are they particularly interested? And then it also gave me a chance to hold myself more accountable. So even the fact that I mentioned in this case, okay, I have these other books that I'm working on. They're not done yet, right? But by saying it goes ahead and reflects like, okay, I am doing this, and I'm presenting on a couple of them, like little pieces of the ideas at various conferences. So again, it's kind of like getting all my ducks in a row, and then being able to connect other people, as Shumaila was saying, right? You're connecting to these top people, and as Claire was saying, to go ahead and then just write the things down. But and then one last thing I was going to say, so it was mentioned, Shumaila, we could do, a video showing of your mini documentary, same thing of Jenni's. And so then Claire, we need something of yours, right? Like a food tasting related. What are you willing to try?
I don't know if you want to do that. Oh, I have a recipe for coffee. So we could do that, but like most of them you don't want. Like you don't want like the ground human flesh and snake flesh ones. Like that will go badly.
Yeah, that was an interesting insights from you guys. So again, thank you so much to our dear authors for joining us for today's event. We've been talking for almost more than an hour already. And again, as followed by Claire what just mentioned, if you haven't seen that book on the shelves or anywhere else, it's time for you to write your own, or to write that book, right? So thank you again for joining us in this event, and hopefully we can materialize or realize those kinds of book launch. So just get in touch with your subject librarian or me or Lisa, and we will be happy to help you with putting out your your book launch, or even this food tasting or some sort of festivities. that we can do on the near future. Thank you for that. And again, that's it for me. My name is April and I'm your moderator. Thank you for joining us today and have a great day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Bye.
April. Thanks, Liza. Great to be here with you, Claire.
Bye-bye.
Oh, everyone's gone. Okay, bye. Thanks.